The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stretched farther than most beings could see. Thousands of different species sat in floating chairs that moved through the air without sound. The dome above them showed the stars and planets of their vast civilization. Today, those stars looked dim and cold because fear filled every heart in the chamber. Ambassador Velthari of the Etherian Republic stood at the center speaking platform. Her blue skin had turned pale and her 4 arms shook as she spoke. The hologram above her head showed terrible images that made even the bravest warriors look away. Entire planets turned to dust in moments. Stars going dark forever, billions, of lives ending in screams that no one could hear in the empty space between worlds. "The Void Swarm has taken the Kepler system," Velthari said. Her voice cracked with pain. 17 billion souls lived there 3 days ago. Now there is nothing but empty space and floating rocks. The images changed to show the enemy. They looked like living crystals the size of mountains that could fly through space faster than light. Their ships had no solid form. They could become like ghosts and pass through any wall or shield. When they found a planet with life, they would land and begin to eat everything. Plants, animals, people, even the rocks and water. They consumed entire worlds and used that matter to make more of themselves. Council Chairman Morden raised his 6 arms for silence. His people were known as great warriors, but even they had failed against this enemy. "The Confederation lost 800 ships at the Battle of Proxima Gate," he said. "Our best weapons pass through them like they are made of air. Our shields cannot stop them. They eat energy itself." Elder historian Kexvin slowly stood up. He was older than most civilizations in the galaxy. His people had lived among the stars since before many species had even learned to make fire. When he spoke, everyone listened because he knew things that others had forgotten. "I have searched the ancient records," Kexvin said. "The Void Swarm is not new. They destroyed the ancients who came before us. The records speak of entire galaxies going silent. But there are also stories of beings who could fight them. Beings from worlds so dangerous that just living there made them into weapons." The chamber filled with whispers. Everyone knew the stories of Deathworlders, but most thought they were just myths. Planets where the gravity could crush normal beings, where the air itself was poison, where the weather could kill and the animals were all predators. No civilized species could survive such places. "Show us these records," Chairman Morden commanded. The Elder activated an ancient data crystal. The hologram changed to Showstar, charts from millions of years ago. Red markers showed where the Void Swarm had attacked. Green markers showed where they had been stopped. The pattern was clear. Wherever the swarm met resistance, it came from the same type of worlds. Planets marked in the old records with symbols that meant danger and death. The ancients called them guardian worlds, Kexavin explained. Planets where life learned to fight against everything. The beings from these worlds were not like us. They did not build great cities or make beautiful art. They made weapons. They made war. They made themselves into things that could survive anything. Velthari looked at the star charts with growing hope. "Are any of these guardian worlds still inhabited? Can we contact them?" The old historian's expression grew troubled. Most went silent long ago. The Deathworlders either destroyed themselves in wars or left their home planets to spread across the galaxy. But there is one world marked in the outer rim that still shows signs of life. The star chart zoomed in on a small yellow star in a region that most civilized species avoided. The area was filled with dangerous radiation and unstable space that made travel difficult. But there, in the 3rd orbit from the star, was a blue and green planet that pulsed with energy signatures. "The ancient records call it Terra," Kexvin said, "but the current inhabitants call it Earth. The beings there call themselves humans. The classification marking shows it as a Class 12 death world with an extreme hazard rating." Gasps echoed through the chamber. Most council members had never heard of a world rated higher than Class 5. A Class 12 world would kill most known species just by breathing the air or feeling the gravity. Commander Zixhal of the Synthetic Coalition stood up. His people were artificial beings made of metal and energy who thought themselves superior to biological life. Even he looked worried. "Our deep space sensors show that world has massive electromagnetic fields and radiation levels that would Fry our circuits. The gravity is twice what most species can survive. The atmosphere contains poison gas. How could anything intelligent evolve there? Perhaps that is exactly why they could fight the Void Swarm, Chairman Mordun said slowly. Beings who grew up fighting their own planet every day might know how to fight enemies that others cannot touch. The debate that followed lasted for hours. Some council members argued that contacting unknown Deathworlders was too dangerous. Others said they had no choice. The Void Swarm was moving closer to the core worlds every day. Soon they would reach the council's home systems, and then nowhere would be safe. Finally, Velthari spoke again. My people are dying. My children are crying in shelters while monsters eat our sun. I would make a deal with devils themselves if it could save them. What do we have to lose that the swarm will not take anyway? The vote was close, but the decision was made. They would send a message to Earth. The first contact between the Galactic Council and humanity would not be a greeting between equals. It would be a desperate plea for help from beings who had run out of options. Admiral Kethmore of the Council Fleet was chosen to record the message. He stood before the transmission equipment with his uniform pressed and his medals gleaming. Behind him were displays showing the swarm's destruction and the Council's own failed attempts to stop them. People of Earth, he began. We are the Galactic Council, representing 300 species and 12,000 worlds. We reach out to you because we face extinction. An enemy called the Void Swarm consumes everything in its path. Our weapons cannot touch them. Our shields cannot stop them. We ask for your help not as conquerors or rulers, but as fellow beings who wish to live. The message was compressed and sent through the fastest communication relays the Council possessed. It would take 14 hours to reach Earth even at faster than light speeds. 14 hours during which more worlds might fall to the swarm. As they waited for a response, the Council members tried not to think about what they had just done. They had sent a message to beings evolved on a world so dangerous it could kill them just by existing there. Beings who might be more terrifying than the enemy they faced. But when death comes from the void between stars, even devils start to look like angels. The response came faster than anyone expected. Earth had technology that could communicate across galactic distances in real time. The return message was simple and direct in a way that made everyone nervous. Message received and understood. Response will be provided within 72 hours. Prepare to receive diplomatic contact at coordinates you will be transmitted separately. Recommend clearing all military vessels from contact zone for safety reasons. The message was signed by someone called Admiral Hyunwoo of the United Earth Systems Navy. The fact that Earth had a navy that operated in space told the Council that these humans had already mastered technologies that some Council species were still developing. As the hours passed and the Council waited for Earth's full response, the Void Swarm continued its advance. 3 more star systems went dark while alien civilizations held their breath and prayed to whatever gods they believed in that the beings from the death world called Earth would prove to be their salvation rather than simply a different form of doom. Admiral Hyunwoo stood on the bridge of the UES Tenacious and watched the alien message play for the 5th time. The holographic display showed creatures that looked nothing like humans asking for help against something that was eating entire planets. Behind him, his senior staff studied the data with the careful attention that had kept Earth safe for 3 centuries since they first reached the stars. Captain Sora moved to stand beside the Admiral. She was younger than most ship commanders, but had earned her position fighting pirates in the outer systems. Her dark eyes studied the images of crystalline ships that could phase through matter like ghosts. They're asking us to fight in a war that has been going on for years, she said, against an enemy that their entire civilization cannot stop. Commander Dong Min looked up from his tactical station where he had been analyzing the combat footage the aliens had included with their plea. Admiral, these beings fight nothing like us. Look at their ship designs. Everything is built around energy shields and beam weapons. They stand still and shoot at each other until one side runs out of power. Tactical Officer Yu Jin pulled up a comparison chart showing human and alien military doctrine. Sir, they have never seen kinetic warfare. Their entire concept of combat is based on energy manipulation. No projectile weapons, no explosive ordnance. They do not even use missiles. Hyunwoo nodded slowly as he processed this information. Humanity had spent 300 years preparing for contact with alien civilizations. They had built weapons and ships designed to fight enemies they could not yet imagine. Now they discovered that their preparation might have been better than they thought. "What about this void swarm?" the Admiral asked. "Can we hurt them?" Commander Dong Min brought up the technical analysis his team had completed. Based on the recordings, the enemy uses some form of quantum phasing to avoid energy weapons. They can shift their molecular structure to let beams pass through them. But, Admiral, there is nothing in the data suggesting they can phase against kinetic impact. Yujin smiled in a way that would have frightened the aliens if they could see it. They evolved to fight beings who use energy weapons exclusively. They have no defense against a railgun firing depleted uranium slugs at relativistic speeds. The Admiral turned to look out at the stars beyond Earth's solar system. Somewhere out there, billions of beings were dying while their leaders begged for help from a species they had never met. Humanity had always prided itself on helping those who could not help themselves. But this would not be a rescue mission, run by diplomats and aid workers. "Communications," Hyunwoo called. "Get me fleet command on priority channels. Tell them we need a full strategic assessment within 6 hours." The message that went to Earth's military headquarters was marked with classification codes that had not been used since the colony wars. Within minutes, every major military installation on Earth and its colonies received orders to begin immediate preparations for the largest deployment in human history. General Taemin received the alien transmission at the Lunar Defense Complex while reviewing plans for the new Mars shipyards. As the Supreme Commander of Earth's Space Forces, he had spent decades preparing for this moment. Not the specific situation of aliens asking for help, but the moment when humanity would have to fight for its place in a galaxy full of unknown threats. "Analysis team," he called to his staff. "I want complete tactical profiles on both the aliens and their enemy within 4 hours. Assume worst-case scenarios for all unknowns." Colonel Yoon Hee headed the xenobiology department and had studied every piece of evidence for alien life that Earth's deep space probes had ever collected. "General, based on the physiology shown in their message, most of these species evolved on low-gravity worlds with controlled environments. They are not adapted for the kind of stress that combat requires." "What about their technology?" General Taemin asked. Major Jun Ho from the Technical Analysis Division had been working on that question since the message arrived. "Sir, their energy manipulation is centuries ahead of us. Their faster-than-light communication and travel capabilities exceed our best theories. But their military technology is strangely limited. No kinetic weapons, no chemical explosives, no nuclear weapons that we can detect." The general studied the tactical displays with growing understanding. They never needed to develop those technologies because they never fought against beings who could defend against energy weapons. They are like medieval knights with perfect armor asking us to fight their wars. Back on the Tenacious, Admiral Hyunwoo received updates from across Earth's military network. Shipyards were being converted to produce military vessels. Weapon factories were running at full capacity. Transport ships were being loaded with enough supplies to sustain a fleet far from home for years if necessary. Captain Sora reviewed the latest intelligence reports. "Admiral, our deep space sensors are detecting massive energy signatures moving toward the galactic core. The void swarm is accelerating its advance. At current speed, they will reach the Council's home systems within 2 months." "Time frame for deployment?" Hyunwoo asked. Commander Dongmin consulted with the logistics teams. "First response fleet can be ready in 48 hours. Full battle group will require 1 week. If we strip defenses from the outer colonies, we can field 800 ships within 10 days. Yujin looked up from her tactical planning. "Sir, recommendation is to deploy the 3rd Fleet immediately. They specialize in first contact scenarios and have the best xenological support staff. We can assess the situation and provide intelligence for the main force." The Admiral made his decision with the speed that had made him the youngest fleet commander in Earth's history. "Signal the 3rd Fleet to begin immediate deployment. I want a full diplomatic and military assessment team ready to leave within 12 hours. Contact the aliens and tell them we are sending representatives." The message that went back to the Galactic Council was brief and professional in the way that made experienced military officers nervous. Earth was not sending negotiators or observers. They were sending a fleet commanded by beings who had evolved on a world that tried to kill them every day. As the UES Tenacious and its escort ships prepared for the journey to alien space, teams of scientists and military analysts worked around the clock to understand what they were getting into. The aliens had provided star charts and navigation data along with detailed technical specifications for their faster-than-light travel methods. Dr. Min-Ah led the xenobiology team assigned to understand the alien species they would be working with. The physiological data suggests most council species have fragile bone structures and limited cardiovascular systems. Extended high-gravity environments would be fatal to them within hours. Dr. Sang-Ho from the psychology department had been studying the cultural information included in the alien transmission. Their entire civilization appears to be built around cooperation and consensus building. They have never faced an existential threat that required immediate military action. Admiral Hyun-woo reviewed all the reports as his ship prepared to enter the experimental faster-than-light drive that Earth's engineers had reverse-engineered from the alien navigation data. In less than 24 hours, they would make contact with the first alien civilization humanity had ever encountered. The crew of the Tenacious understood that they were not just representing Earth in first contact with alien beings. They were potentially the advance guard for a military intervention that would determine whether billions of alien civilians lived or died. The pressure would have crushed most beings, but humans had evolved under pressure that would kill most species just by existing. As the Tenacious entered hyperspace and began its journey to the galactic core, Admiral Hyun-woo stood in his ready room looking at the pictures on his desk. His family back on Earth. His daughter who would grow up in a galaxy where humanity was no longer alone. His son who might someday command ships traveling between the stars as easily as their ancestors. Had sailed between continents. The galaxy had cried out for help, and Earth was answering. What the aliens would discover was that help from Deathworlders came with costs and consequences they could not yet imagine. Humanity would save them from the Void Swarm, but in doing so would change the balance of power in galactic civilization forever. The war for the galaxy's survival was about to begin, and the beings who had asked for Earth's help were about to learn why some worlds were marked as too dangerous for civilized species to approach. The Void Swarm had finished consuming the mining world of Praxis 7 when the fabric of space itself began to tear at the edge of the star system. The crystalline entities that made up the swarm's collective consciousness turned their attention toward the disturbance with the slow patience of predators who had never known defeat. For 3 standard years, they had devoured everything in their path without meeting meaningful resistance. Reality split open like a wound, and ships began to emerge from the hyperspace portal. But these were not the sleek energy-based vessels that the swarm had grown accustomed to destroying. These ships looked like they had been built for war from the moment their keels were laid. Thick armor plating covered angular hulls bristling with weapon systems that the swarm's collective memory could not identify. Commander Ji-hoon stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution and watched through the main display as his fleet finished its emergence into normal space. Around him, his crew worked with the quiet efficiency of professionals who had trained for this moment their entire careers. Lieutenant Hae-won monitored the weapon systems that could deliver destruction across interplanetary distances. Engineer Min-ho managed power distribution for systems that drew more energy than most planets consumed. Navigator Yoon-ji calculated firing solutions for targets moving at relativistic speeds. Enemy contact, reported sensor operator Kyung-soo. 27 hostile vessels detected, range approximately 2 million kilometers in closing. Mass displacement suggests ships ranging from frigate to dreadnought class. Ji-hoon studied the tactical display with the calm focus of a predator watching prey. The Void Swarm ships moved in patterns that showed intelligence, but not the kind of tactical thinking that humans had developed through millennia of warfare against their own species. Analysis of enemy movement patterns? Lieutenant Hae-won pulled up tracking data from the sensor feeds. Sir, they are approaching in a standard energy combat formation. Largest ships in the center providing covering fire, while smaller vessels attempt to flank us. Their hulls are beginning to show quantum fluctuations consistent with phasing technology. The swarm entities were preparing to use the same tactic that had defeated every other fleet they had encountered. By shifting their molecular structure, they could allow energy weapons to pass harmlessly through their ships, while their own weapons remained solid enough to deliver devastating attacks against enemies who could not return the favor. Engineer. Minho looked up from his console where power readings showed all systems operating at peak efficiency. Commander, kinetic weapon systems are fully charged and ready for firing. Missile tubes are loaded with high-velocity penetrator rounds. Point defense systems are active. Ji-hoon opened a communication channel to the rest of his fleet. 37 human ships spread across the system in a formation that looked random to outside observers, but was actually a carefully planned trap designed to maximize firepower while minimizing the enemy's ability to concentrate their attacks. All ships! This is Retribution Actual, Ji-hoon's voice carried across the tactical network. We are about to engage an enemy that has never faced kinetic warfare. Remember your training. These beings phase to avoid energy weapons, but physics still applies to solid matter moving at sufficient velocity. The Void Swarm ships completed their approach and began the phasing sequence that had made them invincible against civilized galactic forces. Their crystalline hulls became translucent as they shifted into a quantum state that existed partially outside normal space-time. Energy weapons would pass through them without effect, while their own weapons remained solid enough to tear through any conventional defense. Enemy vessels have completed phase transition, Sensor Operator Kyung-soo reported. They are beginning to target our ships with what appears to be exotic particle beam weapons. Ji-hoon watched the enemy weapons fire harmlessly against his ships. Thick armor plating. The swarm's energy-based attacks had been designed to overwhelm the energy shields that galactic civilization used for defense. Against solid steel and ceramic composite armor, they might as well have been flashlights. All ships, Ji-hoon commanded. Execute firing plan Alpha. Target the largest enemy vessels first. The human fleet opened fire with weapons that had been developed in the laboratories of Earth and refined through centuries of human conflict. Railguns accelerated tungsten slugs to a significant fraction of light speed. Missile launchers fired projectiles guided by artificial intelligence systems that could think faster than biological minds. Chemical explosive warheads detonated with the fury of controlled nuclear reactions. The Void Swarm discovered that their phasing technology had never been tested against pure kinetic force, delivered with mathematical precision. The quantum fields that allowed energy to pass through them harmlessly had no effect on solid matter moving at speeds that turned mass into devastating weapons. Lieutenant Hae-won watched her targeting systems track direct hits across the enemy formation. Multiple strikes confirmed on primary targets. Enemy Dreadnought-class vessel is breaking apart. Frigate equivalents are showing massive structural damage. The largest swarm entity tried to reform itself using the matter absorption, capabilities that had allowed it to consume entire planets. But the follow-up salvo from the human fleet included depleted uranium penetrator rounds designed to shatter on impact and spread radioactive material throughout the target structure. The creature's ability to regenerate was overwhelmed by damage that occurred faster than it could repair itself. Navigator Yoonji tracked the movement of swarm vessels attempting to escape the engagement zone. Sir, smaller enemy units are trying to withdraw to minimum safe distance. Recommend pursuit with missile strikes. Engineer Minho adjusted power distribution to support extended combat operations. Commander, all systems remain at full capacity. Ammunition reserves at 87%. We can maintain this level of firepower for extended engagement. The battle that the galactic community had expected to last for hours was over in less than 15 minutes. The Void Swarm entities that had terrorized civilized space for 3 years were reduced to debris floating in the vacuum between planets. Their collective consciousness that had consumed the thoughts and memories of billions of beings simply ceased to exist when the physical structures that housed it were destroyed by weapons they had no defense against. All enemy contacts destroyed, Sensor Operator Kyung-soo reported. No hostile signatures detected within scanning range. Commander Ji-hoon opened communication channels to the surviving alien ships that had witnessed the engagement from the Bao outer system. 3 Etherian Republic vessels and 2 Council patrol craft had watched in stunned silence as the human fleet accomplished in minutes what their entire civilization had failed to do in years of warfare. This is Commander Ji-hoon. Of the Earth vessel Retribution to all Council ships in the system, he transmitted. The immediate threat has been neutralized. We are prepared to provide assistance to any vessels requiring aid or to escort survivors to safety. The response from the alien ships came after a long delay that suggested heated discussions among their crews. When Ambassador Velthari finally replied, her voice carried a mixture of relief and something that might have been fear. Commander Ji-hoon, this is Ambassador Velthari aboard the Council ship Harmony. We witnessed your engagement with the Void Swarm. How did you destroy them so easily? Our weapons cannot even touch them when they phase. Ji-hoon's response was delivered with the matter-of-fact tone of someone explaining basic physics to children. The enemy's phasing technology is designed to defend against energy-based weapons. It provides no protection against kinetic impact. We simply applied sufficient force to overcome their structural integrity. What the human commander did not explain was that the weapons his fleet had just used represented the minimum force necessary to ensure rapid target elimination. Earth's military had spent centuries developing increasingly efficient methods of destroying things that did not want to be destroyed. The Void Swarm had encountered the mild end of humanity's capacity for violence. Navigator Yoon-ji updated the AudioBook tactical display to show clear space where moments before an unstoppable enemy had threatened the existence of galactic civilization. Sir, long-range sensors detect no additional swarm signatures within 3 light years. Recommend establishing patrol pattern to ensure no entities escape the engagement. The human fleet began the systematic process of securing the battlefield, while alien observers tried to comprehend what they had witnessed. The beings they had contacted for help had not just defeated the Void Swarm, but had made it look effortless. More importantly, they had done it with technology that seemed primitive compared to galactic standards, but was apparently far more effective than anything the Council possessed. As reports of the engagement began to spread across the galactic communication network, civilizations that had spent years in terror of the Void Swarm began to ask new questions. If the humans could destroy the swarm so easily, what else could they destroy? What did it mean for galactic civilization that the most effective military force in known space came from a world so dangerous that most species could not survive there? News of the Praxis 7 engagement spread through the galaxy faster than the speed of light itself. In the great chambers of the Galactic Council, delegates from 300 species watched the combat recordings over and over, trying to understand how beings they had never heard of had accomplished what their entire civilization could not. The holographic displays showed the same impossible sequence of events each time. Human ships emerging from hyperspace, brief weapons exchange, and the complete annihilation of Void Swarm forces that had seemed invincible just moments before. Fleet. Admiral Jae-sung stood on the command bridge of the UES Indomitable, humanity's newest and most powerful dreadnought, as he prepared to address the assembled alien leaders. The ship itself was a statement of human military philosophy made manifest in steel and ceramic armor. Where alien vessels prioritized beauty and energy efficiency, human ships were built with one purpose: to destroy anything that threatened them and survive whatever tried to destroy them in return. Behind the Admiral stood his command staff, each representing a different aspect of Earth's military machine. Strategic Officer Ne Young had spent years studying every piece of intelligence about galactic civilization that Earth's deep space probes had collected. Communications Director Seok Jin understood 17 different alien languages and had designed the protocols for humanity's first formal diplomatic contact. Marine Colonel Bo Young commanded the ground forces that could fight on any world where humans could survive, and many where they could not. "Honored delegates of the Galactic Council," Admiral Jae-sung began, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had commanded fleets in battles that had determined the fate of star systems. "Humanity acknowledges your request for assistance and accepts the responsibility of protecting galactic civilization from the Void Swarm threat." The silence that followed his words was profound. Ambassador Velthari, still struggling to process the casual efficiency with which her species' greatest nightmare had been eliminated, managed to speak first. "Admiral, we are grateful beyond words for your intervention. But we must understand how you accomplished what we could not. Your weapons destroyed entities that our most advanced technology could not even touch." Strategic Officer Ne Young stepped forward, her tactical briefing displaying detailed analysis of the engagement on holographic screens visible to every delegate in the chamber. The Void Swarm's defensive capabilities were specifically evolved to counter energy-based weapons systems. Their quantum phasing technology creates a selective barrier that allows photons and exotic particles to pass through their hulls while maintaining structural integrity for their own offensive systems. Communications Director Seok Jin continued the explanation with the patient tone of an instructor teaching basic concepts. Human military doctrine developed along different lines due to the unique conditions on our homeworld. Earth's high gravity and dense atmosphere make energy weapons less efficient than kinetic systems. We have spent centuries perfecting the art of destroying targets using mass and velocity rather than exotic energy manipulation. Chairman Mordoon leaned forward in his floating chair, his 6 eyes reflecting confusion and growing concern. Your homeworld shaped your military technology? How dangerous must Earth be to require such weapons? Marine Colonel Bo Young answered with the casual directness that characterized human communication. Earth experiences regular geological upheavals that can destroy continents. Our weather systems include rotating atmospheric disturbances with wind speeds exceeding 400 kilometers per hour. The local fauna includes predators that can hunt and kill humans, despite our technological advantages. Military conflict on Earth requires weapons and tactics capable of functioning under conditions that would be considered catastrophic emergencies on most civilized worlds. The implications of this information settled over the council chamber, like a cold wind. These beings had evolved on a world so hostile that their basic military equipment was designed to function during planetary disasters. What they considered normal defensive preparations had proven devastatingly effective against threats that galactic civilization could not handle. Elder historian Kexavan spoke with the trembling voice of someone who had lived long enough to understand the significance of what he was witnessing. You come from a true death world. Your species has evolved not just to survive, but to wage war under conditions that would kill most of us simply by existing there. Admiral Jae-sung nodded acknowledgement of the observation. Humanity has indeed adapted to challenging environmental conditions. This adaptation has produced military capabilities that appear to be effective against threats that conventional galactic forces cannot engage. However, our intervention in the current crisis comes with certain operational requirements. Strategic Officer Nae Young activated detailed star charts showing the current disposition of void swarm forces throughout the galaxy. Red markers indicated confirmed swarm presence, while yellow areas showed regions where attacks were suspected but not confirmed. The scope of the infestation was staggering, covering thousands of star systems across multiple galactic arms. Complete tactical command of all military operations against the Void Swarm, Na Young stated with clinical precision. Human forces require unrestricted operational authority to conduct combat missions without interference from Council military doctrine or political considerations. Communications Director Seok Jin added the diplomatic framework that would govern their cooperation. Unrestricted access to all intelligence regarding swarm capabilities, tactical patterns, and suspected locations. Human strategic planning requires comprehensive data to develop effective campaign strategies. The final requirement was delivered by Marine Colonel Bo Young with the finality of someone stating an unchangeable fact. Non-interference with human combat operations. Our tactical methods may appear extreme to civilized species, but they have proven effective. Council forces will maintain minimum safe distances from active engagement zones. Ambassador Velthari exchanged glances with other Council delegates before responding. Admiral, these terms essentially place you in command of the entire war effort. You are asking us to trust beings we have known for less than a week with the survival of galactic civilization. Admiral Jae-sung's expression did not change as he delivered humanity's position. The alternative is the continued advancement of the Void Swarm toward your core worlds. Our preliminary assessment indicates their main hive structures are located beyond the galactic rim. Traditional Council defensive strategies will not prevent them from consuming your remaining inhabited systems. Strategic Officer Nae Young brought up projections showing the swarm's advance if left unchecked. Current rate of expansion will bring swarm forces to the Council's primary worlds within 18 standard months. Defensive actions alone will not alter this timeline. The threat must be eliminated at its source. Commander Zixhal of the Synthetic Coalition processed this information through artificial intelligence systems that could calculate possibilities faster than biological minds could think. You are proposing to take offensive action against the Swarm's base of operations. No Council force has ever successfully penetrated their territory and returned. Communications. Director Seok Jin smiled with an expression that made several delegates unconsciously move away from their display screens. Council forces have not possessed the tools necessary for such an operation. Human forces do. Marine Colonel Bo Young provided additional context that chilled the chamber. Preliminary analysis indicates the Void Swarm originates from extragalactic space. Human forces are prepared to conduct transgalactic operations if necessary to eliminate the threat. Completely, the concept of taking war beyond the galaxy itself was so far outside Council military thinking that several delegates required translation assistance to understand what the humans were proposing. These beings were not offering to help defend against the swarm. They were announcing their intention to hunt it to extinction across multiple galaxies if necessary. Elder historian Kexfin spoke into the stunned silence that followed. In all the ancient records, I have never encountered beings capable of such strategic thinking. You propose to end a threat that has existed for millions of years. Admiral Jae Sung's final statement carried the weight of absolute certainty. The Void Swarm represents an existential threat to intelligent life. Humanity does not accept existential threats. We eliminate them. As the Council delegates began the process of formally transferring military command to the human fleet, communications networks across the galaxy carried news of the terms that Earth had demanded. Civilizations that had begged for help from the Deathworlders were beginning to understand that salvation came with a price they had not anticipated. The humans had not come to join galactic civilization as junior partners seeking guidance from more advanced species. They had arrived as apex predators offering to solve a problem that no one else could handle, but only on their own terms and using their own methods. The galaxy was about to learn that when Deathworlders offered to help, the cure could be more transformative than the original disease. 6 standard months after the first human fleet engaged the Void Swarm at Praxis 7, the last hive mind of the ancient enemy broadcast its death scream across subspace frequencies that had carried its consciousness for 3 million years. Admiral Tae-hyun stood in the command center of the UES Inevitable, surrounded by displays showing the systematic dismantlement of a threat that had consumed entire galaxies before Earth's sun had even formed. The final engagement took place in the space between galaxies where the swarm had built its primary breeding facilities from the matter of 1,000 dead civilizations. Fleet Coordinator In Young tracked the destruction of biomechanical structures the size of small moons, while xenobiology specialist Sang Wook recorded the death of organisms that had evolved beyond the need for planets or stars. Tactical Analyst Yejin calculated the resources that would be freed up now that humanity no longer needed to maintain a transgalactic military presence. Final Hive Complex is breaking apart, In Young reported as her sensors tracked the collapse of structures that had taken millennia to grow. No additional swarm signatures detected within 50 galactic radii. Long-range probes confirm complete elimination of all identified breeding populations. The campaign that ended the Void Swarm had not been a war in any sense that galactic civilization understood. It had been an extermination conducted with the methodical precision that humans applied to any problem they decided to solve permanently. Where the swarm had expected to find more prey species to consume, they instead encountered something far more dangerous than themselves, a species that had evolved not just to survive, but to systematically eliminate threats to their existence. Xenobiology. Specialist Sang Wook completed his final analysis of the enemy that had terrorized the galaxy for 3 standard years. The Void Swarm was essentially a macroorganism that had consumed its original galaxy approximately 4 million years ago. Its expansion into this galaxy represents a natural feeding cycle that has repeated across multiple galactic clusters. The revelation that the swarm was not unique, but part of a larger pattern of galactic consumption, had emerged during the early phases of the human campaign. Deep space reconnaissance had discovered the remains of 17 other galaxies that showed signs of complete biological consumption, followed by swarm expansion to new feeding grounds. Tactical Analyst Yejin brought up strategic displays showing the current disposition of human forces across the galaxy. Sir, patrol fleets have established monitoring stations in all sectors previously occupied by swarm forces. Early warning networks are active and functional. No similar entities detected within current scanning range. Admiral Tae-hyun reviewed the reports that would be transmitted to Earth and the Galactic Council. The human military had not simply defeated the Void Swarm. They had studied it, cataloged it, and then hunted it to extinction across multiple star systems with a thoroughness that had impressed even Earth's own strategic planners. The campaign had revealed capabilities that humanity had developed, but never needed to use on such a scale. Transgalactic logistics networks that could supply fleets operating millions of light-years from Earth. Weapons systems that could crack planets and sterilize entire star systems. Intelligence-gathering methods that could track enemies across dimensional barriers and predict their movements with mathematical precision. Communications from the Galactic Council, Fleet Coordinator In Young announced. They are requesting confirmation of mission completion and estimated timeline for human fleet withdrawal from Council space. The final transmission from the Council carried undertones that suggested their relief at the swarm's destruction was tempered by growing anxiety about humanity's continued presence in their territory. 6 months of watching human fleets operate with casual efficiency had given galactic leaders new perspectives on the balance of power among civilized species. Admiral Tae-hyun composed his response with the same professional directness that had characterized all human communications during the campaign. Galactic Council Leadership. This is Admiral Tae-hyun, commanding the United Earth Systems Transgalactic Fleet. The Void Swarm threat has been completely eliminated. All identified hive structures have been destroyed, and breeding populations have been rendered extinct. Xenobiology specialist Sang-wook provided additional technical details for the Council's scientific advisors. Biological analysis confirms that the swarm entities were incapable of reproduction without access to specific rare elements found only in the cores of populated worlds. By denying them access to these resources and destroying their existing reproductive infrastructure, we have eliminated any possibility of species recovery. The scope of the human achievement was staggering even by the standards of beings who had built civilizations spanning thousands of star systems. In 6 months, humanity had tracked down and eliminated a threat that had survived for millions of years and consumed the biological matter of entire galaxies. They had done it with a combination of superior technology, tactical innovation, and strategic thinking that galactic civilization had never encountered. Tactical analyst Ye Jin added the operational assessment that would define human-alien relations for the next century. Monitoring stations will remain active to ensure no recurrence of similar threats. Human patrol fleets will maintain presence in previously affected sectors as a precautionary measure. The message that these monitoring stations would be permanently staffed by human forces was delivered with characteristic understatement. What the Admiral did not explain was that Earth had no intention of allowing another existential threat to develop without human knowledge. The galaxy was now under the protection of beings who took a very direct approach to potential dangers. Fleet Coordinator In Young transmitted the final strategic assessment to both Earth Command and the Galactic Council. Long-range sensor networks detect no additional macroorganisms of similar type within current scanning range. However, deep space probes have identified 17 other galactic clusters showing signs of complete biological consumption consistent with swarm activity. The implication was clear. The void swarm that had threatened this galaxy was not unique. Somewhere in the universe, other versions of the same threat were consuming other civilizations that had no defense against entities that could phase through energy weapons and regenerate from planetary matter. Admiral Tae-hyun's final communication to the Galactic Council was brief and professional. Human forces stand ready to provide assistance against similar threats should they emerge in the future. We recommend establishing formal diplomatic protocols for ongoing cooperation between Earth and Council civilizations. What the Admiral did not mention was that humanity had already begun planning for the next phase of galactic development. The campaign against the Void Swarm had demonstrated that human military capabilities were not just superior to anything galactic civilization possessed, but were effective against threats that other species could not even recognize as dangerous. Tactical analyst Ye Jin made an observation that would prove prophetic in the years that followed. Sir, analysis of Council communications suggests they are more concerned about human intentions than they ever were about the Void Swarm. They appear to understand that we represent a fundamental change in the galactic balance of power. The irony was not lost on the human command staff. The galaxy had begged for help from beings they considered primitive and dangerous. When that help arrived in the form of overwhelming military superiority, they discovered that their saviors were indeed dangerous, but not in the way they had expected. Admiral Tae-hyun stood at the observation deck of the Inevitable and looked out at the stars of a galaxy that was now under human protection, whether its inhabitants understood that fact or not. Earth had responded to a plea for help, and in doing so had established itself as the dominant military power in galactic civilization. The age of human galactic dominance had begun not with conquest or expansion, but with a simple response to beings who needed protection from something they could not handle themselves. Sometimes the most profound changes come not from those who seek power, but from those who are asked to use power they already possess. The galaxy had cried out for help, and humanity had answered with characteristic efficiency. That the cure was more transformative than the original disease was simply the nature of what happened when civilized species asked Deathworlders to solve their problems. The universe was a dangerous place, and now it had guardians who understood exactly how dangerous it could be.